Hey there, for today's topic on Friends First, we're going to talk about the fun, light topic of chauvinism in your relationship. Not ours, yours.
We're Rebecca and Brad, partners in love and friends first. We've been married for 18 years and we're deciding to break things up.
Join us for some honest conversation about being in relationship as your whole self in the big moments and the small, so we can all grow great relationships together.
Okay, so we're going to jump right into a fun story. So, last weekend, I had a birth. So I work as a birth doula, and I knew the birth was coming up. The lady was getting induced, and I didn't think we'd get our date night, which is, something we really look forward to every week. So we talked about that in a different video, so check that out. But anyways, her labor wasn't picking up yet, so we had an opportunity to go on a date. The kitchen wasn't perfect, and I had the choice of deciding, like, should we just jump on that opportunity to go out for a little bit, or should I clean up first and then I come home to a nice clean kitchen? So I decided, which I think was a good choice, to go ahead and let's go out. So we went out. It was lovely. We got to sit outside and share a glass of wine and a nice meal. Got home, did our thing, went to bed, and then I got called to the birth in the middle of the night. It was an awesome birth, but then it was 9 o'clock in the morning and the birth had happened. I was wrapping up with my client, and I texted to share the excitement about the baby being born and I'd be coming home soon. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh, I hope it's not a mess in there. Anyways, I'm driving home, feeling really celebrative. And I think, oh, I can go out on my way, get some, like a big old flat of berries, because it's mid-season of summer and the berries are just amazing. So I got the berries, and then I'm thinking, fruit crisp. This is like a perfect thing, because I didn't even know if I'd have Sunday with my family or not, and I'd miss it if I didn't. So I was in a celebrative mood. Fast forward to when I get home, I walk in, it's like, okay, kitchen's not great. I go in, I do a decon shower, you know the drill. And then I get out of the shower, and I had asked Brad by text on the way home if he would start the crust, that goes on top of the berries. So anyways, I don't think I realized he hadn't done anything with that. That was okay. I get out of the shower, realize the kitchen's still a mess. He's not planning on helping with the crisp necessarily, didn't indicate that in any way. So I decided, I'm going to go ahead and make it anyways, because it still seemed really good. And I had wanted that and wanted to sit down with the kids and have that fun experience and crisp. So jump into your part.
Sure. So, my experience was, because she was out at the birth, right? I woke up in the morning and our kids were out of the house. Our youngest was at a sleepover. Our other kids were doing their various things. So it was like the first time in what seemed like a long time that I was in the house all by myself with nobody. And I was like, oh my gosh, and I didn't know at this point if the baby had come yet or anything. So, and sometimes that takes a long time. This one was actually pretty quick. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to potentially have all this time. What are the things that I have been wanting to do that I needed, like a quiet space with no interruptions to be able to do? And it's like, I considered that. I got my breakfast, and then I decided that what I was going to do was sit down and really learn about this kind of crypto trading, margin trading that I had been hearing about from some friends of ours, but hadn't really learned how to do it or what it was. And I knew I could watch some videos and learn that. So I dove in because I knew I needed an uninterrupted space, started watching these videos and got really focused on that. Rebecca sent me a text saying the baby came at some point. I don't know when it was, 7 or no, it must have been 9 in the morning. Yeah. Oh, right, because you didn't get home till like 11.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay. And my thought was, okay, now I know that she's going to be heading home soon. So I only have this certain amount of time to finish up what I'm doing. So I got to really make sure I stay focused and do that. Now, like in my mind, I knew that I had made a little bit of a mess just for my breakfast. Like I made some oatmeal, so the pan and then my bowl. But it's like, I'm like, oh, that's not that much. And so I wanted to just stay focused on what I was doing. So then she got home. I was almost done with my video. So I'm like, all right, well, she's taking a shower. I'll finish this up. And then it was time for me to go pick up our youngest daughter at 11. So she came out of the shower, said, "Oh, you got to pick her up." I was like, wasn't even aware at the time. I was too focused. And so I'm like, "Oh, quick, I better jump in the car." So I jumped in the car, drove over there to get her, came back. And then when I got back, she had actually made the fruit crisp in the meantime, or got it in the oven. And so I was like, "Oh, the fruit crisp is in there." In my mind, I was planning on helping when I got back. I know I didn't say anything, but that was what I was thinking. And I was like, "Okay, well, you already started that." And she said something like, "Yeah, but the kitchen was real disappointing to have the kitchen be such a mess." And I'm thinking like, well, it wasn't really that big a mess. That was my first thought.
It totally
Yeah, I wasn't not a mess, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And no matter how you look at it, but then I was like, well, what the heck, man? She doesn't value that I had this first alone time and all this time, and that what I'm doing is important too. And she just thinks that, this thing that she hadn't even told me she wanted, this expectation of the house being clean, that she hadn't even told me, like, and now she's going to complain at me about this. And so I got the bottom line, I got defensive. And I started telling her, essentially, like, stop complaining about this.
Right.
And you didn't even ask what I was doing, and you have no idea, and all this type of stuff.
So let me jump in and say, at the point where I'd made the crisp, he was going to pick up our daughter from her sleepover. I was sitting in that feeling of like disappointment and like, can I get over this? And I know from my history that I'm not very good at just getting over it. I'm really good at like shoving it down, and then later I'll blow up. And so I'm not willing to do that. So I knew I had to say something, but I also was like, okay, I hope this goes well. I'm going to try not to attack, because I also have this history of attacking. So I'm working with what I know are my patterns, but also in the conversation feeling really, it was a struggle, and I didn't feel seen. So I started, I'm trying to be respectful of like, look, I had this experience. This was a real experience. I worked all night. I came home wanting time with you guys, but I don't want to come home and do a bunch of cleaning, blah, blah, blah. So anyways, the conversation didn't go swimmingly well.
So the whole time she's saying that, I'm still stuck on the whole idea that, like, this is an expectation that she never told me about, and that why does she think that is more important than what I'm doing, right? And like, I just didn't get it. So it like she said, It didn't go well. It didn't really end well. And so later, a couple of days later at least, we had she had said a little bit more, but then also in particular, a couple of days later, we had a relationship coaching session with our coach.
Oh, yeah, I guess in the conversation, I did something kind of new also, which is like, let's talk about this in our coaching session. Right. So that was cool.
Which I was totally up for at the time, because I was sure she was off, right? So I'm like, yes.
And I should say, I also thought there's a likelihood that I'm just being a bitch again. But it's like, I want to know it. I don't want to keep being the bitch. And so if there's something for me to learn her, totally, I can do that. Even though I was like totally scared also, and that's true.
So, but it was brilliant that she said that, because then we did.
Yeah.
Or she did, or we did, whatever. She brought it up. And so then I got to look at like, well, what the heck? Because like, what I was revealing to myself, what our coach was helping me reveal, and what she was expressing to me, really, it became clear that what was going on was a level of chauvinism, and from me in our relationship, the way I was treating her. And it was like shocking at first, because like, I've heard this idea of chauvinism, like it's a hot topic in our culture right now, sexism, chauvinism, racism, all these different things,
misogyny.
Right? Misogyny. And I was like, I never really related to it per se, because from like my upbringing, because in my upbringing, my family system, my mom was really always sort of like the top dog in most ways. And so it's like, how could my family system have been chauvinistic if the woman, the mom, is the top of the hierarchy chain?
Yeah.
It's like, I never really got it.
Modern professional, successful businesswoman.
Totally.
Yeah.
But what occurred to me after, like this, like really showing up in my face in this, from her, taking a strong stand, from the support of our coach, was like, that's clearly how I'm acting, or I was acting in this scenario. And so, like, how could that be? And what finally dawned on me was that both of my parents were actually chauvinists. And this is what I mean. It's not so much like the man was hierarchically higher than the woman. It was that the roles of the feminine and masculine, or the traditionally motherly female roles, were always sort of looked down on by my parents. You know, the nurturing role, the housework roles, the cleaning, the management of the homestead, you know, if you will. That stuff was always seen as less than, lower importance than things like going out in the world and being successful in your careers, or at, you know, what was told us as kids, like being successful at school, or, you know, sports, or, you know, being like making lots of friends and all these things outward. But like the inward looking stuff, the caring for your environment, caring for your space, not like our house was a disaster, because it really wasn't, but it was never um, shown to be something valuable. It was always seen as less than. And so even though, you know, like with my parents, it wasn't like my mom was less than. It was those roles, that part of the balance was always displayed to me as less than. And that's kind of one of the reasons why it's like it never really struck me. But during our time, uh, Rebecca was mentioning, and she might say more about this later, but that she was mentioning that the way this not working piece of system in our relationship is, it relegates her to the role of the maid. And every time she said that, I was like that was like, for some reason, that was like really hard to
Right.
hear. And so I had to look at, like, why is that so hard to hear? And it was hard to hear because it was true. And I was, by my actions and behavior, was perpetrating that. And that sounded so horrible, because I kind of was like, oh, I'm not a chauvinist, I'm better than all that. And and that wasn't true. The truth was is that this setup was me being chauvinistic. And the other thing I want to say is, you know, when I was like upset about it and conditioned, you know, when I was triggered about it, that I was like, well, she never told me that she wanted the house clean. But it's like, that's like crazy, because like we've known each other for a long time, and at least for 20 years of that time we've known each other, she's always valued having an orderly space, having the house clean, having, you know, the dishes in the kitchen clean in the morning and stuff like that. So it's like, of course I knew. You know, it's silly. It's like if your partner, you know, that you've known for 20 years, 20 plus years, really likes dark chocolate. Everything she ever buys, like her, she says every kind of chocolate is always dark chocolate. And it'd be like if I was like, oh, I'm gonna buy some chocolate for Rebecca, and I got her like a bunch of like milk chocolate,
Or
like,
Hershey's,
yeah, and it just wouldn't make any sense. Like it's like ridiculous. And then I was like upset, because I'm like, well, you never told me. Well, it's like, of course, you know, she's told me millions of times, well, hundreds of times over the years, that that's important to her. So like for me to use that was like just like a silly thing, a ridiculous thing.
Right. So yeah, I mean, in being self-responsible, I could have said, please make sure it gets clean, because that would have ensured it, so I didn't have to have the experience. So I grew up with, you know, it's amazing how this happens, and we fit so perfectly, both in what we're discovering, and in the past, in the stories that we learn. There's always like a way that we support each other in the old thing, if we're not aware and awake to it, and consciously change it up. So
And being honest.
yes, and being honest. So in my history, if you guys have heard any of the other videos, it's like totally Betty Crocker. The woman did do all the stuff, and it was not okay to ask the man, and it was not okay to complain that the man is not helping out, or didn't, you know, carry their weight in the home. Never okay. Like, do you guys know what I mean? Like, if you do, comment below. I mean, these are important topics, and I hear about it all the time when I'm teaching people about birthing, and when I'm working with my doula clients. It's we got to break this up. This is part of what we want to gift ourselves with in our relationship with friends first, and something we want to talk about in our culture, because we can't let it keep living. It's like a really insidious, disgusting virus, and it takes being willing to look at, oh my God, I'm chauvinistic against women, and I'm a woman. What? Like, I'm doing Betty Crocker. I'm perpetrating this story. I'm not being clear and executive. I have to figure out that how I would act with self-worth and with clarity and effectiveness, and being clean and clear, and not just emotional mess, like hoping he gets my message to clean or something like that. So it's really both of us in this journey together. And it does take honesty. Like if I'm just like okay with him only doing a certain part of the cleaning, then and pretend like he's doing more, no, that's just part of the lie, and we have to be willing to look at it, like he's saying, and be honest.
Well, and what I realize, and this is what I would invite you to, is to examine, where this lives in your life and in your relationship. And it may be in things that are sort of like more obvious, like this, where it's like cleaning the house, right? Because that's like your standard sort of male chauvinist thing, like that's the woman's job, and I'm not going to do that. And that's how it showed up in this scenario for us. But, it doesn't even have to be that. And because like with my parents, it was like, it wasn't so clear. It wasn't like my mom was the bottom and my dad was the top. It was like that whole section was looked at as not valuable. And so it's like any time that like, anywhere in your relationship or in our relationship, what I had to look at is like anywhere where I'm thinking my thoughts, needs, desires, and wants are somehow higher level or better or more important than, my partner's thoughts, needs, and wants. That's the essence of that chauvinism. It's like creating that hierarchy and looking at yourself as above and having to look down on, and in this, like with the cleaning, right, like I was saying, like when my, like what I was giving the example of is like that's the like job you don't want, like that's the lower job, like the nurturing stuff. And so it's like when we got together and then when we had kids and had the opportunity for like those roles, it's like I was like, oh, I don't want to touch those roles. And it's like she was taught that like that's what she's supposed to do as the wife,
I can be the good wife. I'll just pick this up. I'll take care, clean up after the kids. Yeah, that's okay.
And so it's like I was like, well, I don't want to do that. And it's like, well, she's willing to do that. Okay, I'll let that happen.
That works.
Yeah, that works. I was willing to like look over there like that. And it's like that doesn't work because it creates these situations like the one we had, and that's just like a little view of a microcosm of like a way that it doesn't work. And it's like you can't like to do that, to be that hierarchical thing, to look at your wants, needs, and desires as more valuable or more important than your partner. That's like the opposite of being friends first and having a relationship at its best, like the goal of what we're up to with our channel, but also equally so in the discovery of our relationship. And so look at that, look for that. Where is that? You can comment below, you can examine that, like share with your partner about where that might live. It's not always the nicest conversation, the happiest one, but it's vital. It's important to root these things out, to really dig deep and discover where those things live so you can be free of that and not live in that way. And so for me, it's like first step was admitting it. It's like this is probably like the 12-step program. I don't know it well, but I think the first one is like admitting you have a problem, right?
Yeah.
And that was hard. And then it's like, okay, so that lives in me, like this chauvinistic thing. So now I gotta like be looking at all the different interactions and in daily life and journaling about it. Like, how does that show up? Where did I give that to our kids? Like, how does it show up in their lives? What interactions? What can I do that's not that? How can I look to be in service to her wants, needs, and desires in an equal way, and not just be like mine are more important? And then how can I really live into having compassionate regard for her, my partner, my wife, as a person, because in all of her wants, needs, and desires, that's something that's really important to her. And whether it's important, what I think is important to me or not, isn't really the point in this scenario. It's that it's important to her, and we're friends first, and we're creating relationship at its best. And so there's an equality in that, and an honesty, and two real people being together. So I invite you to look at those things. We'd love to hear comments, what you're discovering, what you how you're making a change in your relationship in your daily life, and we can all kind of like explore these areas together, because it takes more than just you looking at yourself. Like I didn't get it until it was really reflected back to me strongly by Rebecca and by our wonderful relationship coach Anahata Graceland, who shared so much with us. And it's like now I get the opportunity to heal that in me and in our relationship.
Yay. So tell us if you relate. Any questions or comments, put them below. Subscribe and like.
Right, and hit the little bell thing so you get all the notifications when we release new videos.
So thank you so much for watching too.
And remember,
friends first.